Is Boise State set to give Penn State an upset scare, or is this going to be another dominant victory for the Nittany Lions, kind of like SMU? I think it's somewhere in between.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of this Fiesta Bowl pregame show. Penn State versus Boise State. It felt like it was a long ways away. Now it is here. It is game day. Happy New Year's Eve to each and every one of you. And I'm looking for, we're talking everything. So this is final thoughts for Penn State versus Boise State. Let me know your thoughts, comments, questions, reactions, analysis leading up to this game. And I'll share some of mine again, just to kind of rehash it. Had other episodes, of course, devoted to this game. But I do think Penn State is that much better than a Boise State here, to where Boise State's going to be able to do what it needs to do, but Penn State is that much deeper of a team. They are stronger, they are faster, they have the more star power, if you will, across the board. Ashton Jeanty is Ashton Jeanty, but it is an all or nothing thing for Boise State. So if Ashton Jeanty does not get going, then Penn State really can have an easy game here. But that's easier said than done, because even Oregon, and I know that was at the beginning of the season, I don't put too much stock into that Oregon game from week 2, but I still look at that game and I say, okay, well, Oregon still had its similar players, and they don't just become this elite number one overall team by accident. That was still an Oregon team. Yes. Were they not the same team week 2? They were not. However, Dylan Gates, it's not like somebody else was quarterback, somebody else was running back. Tez Johnson wasn't out there. Ashton Jeanty was still able to get a lot of yards and make an impact. I think for Boise State, coming into this game rested, this was a team that had injuries along its offensive line. So Ashton Jeanty was still able to get good amounts of yardage and just pad the box scores unintentionally. And that was without a fully healthy offensive line. So that's saying something. That is saying something. But I do look at those games where they struggled against a lackluster level of competition. For example, a Wyoming. Wyoming, in my mind, Penn State would beat that team by 50 points easily. At Wyoming, at Beaver Stadium, neutral site. And that was a struggle for the Broncos. That was 17-13. A win's a win, because Penn State had similar games where, hey, you only beat Minnesota by 1 point. You get a scare against USC, though you come away with a victory, 3 points on the road on the West Coast. Not everything was this easy game. So Boise State is allowed to deal with that as well, but in comparison, though, it's the Big Ten Conference compared to the Mountain West Conference. So Boise State just not having the same amount of superstars. There's Ashton Jeanty. There's Hassanine at defensive end, because this Boise State team, this defensive line, this front seven, should have Penn State's respect. Now, fortunately for Penn State, the offensive line is peaking at the right time. If they had struggled against Oregon in the Big Ten championship, especially up front, because that was my biggest concern. The offensive line was playing okay. They weren't even playing that well. They were playing okay through stretches of the season. They would have some better than okay, above average performances here and there, but they never really faced an elite type of front half of the defense. Then when it got to Ohio State, they struggled. Was it a bad performance? Not necessarily, but was it a good one? No. It wasn't. It wasn't horrific, but it was certainly below average, and that decided the outcome of the game. You get inside the 5-yard line twice, and you can't punch it in against Ohio State, so that's where my concerns come from about the offensive line. Oregon, once again, front half of the defense is really talented. Defensive line, one of the best in the country. His linebacker group is solid, and Penn State's offensive line put together its best performance of the season, and it wasn't just good, it was great. They didn't just hold their own. So going up against SMU has one of the better front half defenses in the country. Really, that is a top 3 run defense. And Penn State's offensive line still was, it was kind of a good on good. because nobody really won the day. But the fact that you were able to keep Drew Aller upright, you were still able to get your yardage, you still were able to wear down an SMU front. That's what gives me the confidence in a Penn State offensive line going up against now a Boise State front half of a defense that is better than a West Virginia, that is better than anybody else that they've in Illinois, a USC, all those other teams. And Ohio State and Oregon certainly are better, but Boise State and SMU, but Boise State's not too far behind. They are better than all those other teams that Penn State faced, but to show it against Oregon, now I don't have that concern of going up against a Boise State. Like I said, I'm looking for your questions, comments, just throwing out some general ideas to get the conversation going here in a pregame show, right? We can talk about anything. Boise State's secondary concerns me. For the sake of the Broncos, not for Penn State, for the sake of the Broncos. When I look at Boise State defensively, okay, I say all these great things about the front half of the defense and the defensive line. They have 51 sacks as a team. That is they want to dial up pressure. But what happens if that pressure does not get home? The secondary cannot cover for long enough. And then you have to deal with, okay, well, Boise State has Ashton Jeanty. Don't forget that Penn State had a Heisman contender at tight end. If Tyler Warren had the same production, same type of production at any other position, quarterback, running back, a wide receiver, it is because he is a tight end that he finished 7th in the voting. And shout out to the one person who had the one first place vote for Tyler Warren. Boise State has not seen somebody to the likes of Tyler Warren this season. So a secondary that already struggles to begin with. And if the pressure does not get home, it's because they don't have to cover for long. So if you say, well, Boise State's secondary is actually pretty good, by proxy, yes, because they don't have to cover for that much time because the defensive line and the defensive pressure carries that group. But tell me, when they have to sit back in coverage and hold their own and don't get the benefit of the doubt with a defensive line or an extra blitz, it is not going to go well for the secondary. So I like Trey Wallace in this game. I like Amari Evans in this game. To go along with Tyler Warren, if Boise State's going to sell out its resources in the back half of the defense to try to cover Tyler Warren, Trey Wallace is going to win his one-on-one matchups. Amari Evans is going to break free into the open with the safeties trying to bracket Tyler Warren. And Andy Kotelnicki knows this. He's going to scheme this up. There's going to be a lot of points one way or another. I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State gets into the 40s. My final score prediction is 38-20. Boise State's committed to the ground game. And I think eventually, just because of the volume, Penn State is eventually going to wear down defensively. And Boise State's football is always better in the second half because they just can't. Ashton Jeanty is a battering ram. He's a battering ram. He's just going to keep going and going and going and going. And when we talked to Bob Lundeberg, who covers Boise State for Sports Illustrated here on the show, he talked about that. Like, look, they don't get going right away, and that's because defenses sell out for Boise's run game, and they stop it early on. But it's so grueling. It is so draining, and then eventually it gets there. So it's about stamina. It's about discipline. Penn State can't overreact to Boise State's ground game because then that's when the play action will beat you. But fortunately for Penn State, they have the speed. I won't understand that podcast highlight clip. I don't know who the hosts are, and I still haven't gotten to the bottom of it, but I saw the viral clip about how Boise State is just that much more athletic, that much faster than Penn State, and that is just not true. That is not true. Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton, Jalen Reed, Zacchaeus Wheatley, Tony Rojas, Kobe King, AJ Harris, Zane Durant. Zane Durant's he's a defensive tackle, and he's faster than most of the defensive ends in the country. You cannot say that, Penn State is not athletic and not as athletic as Boise State. There are very few, a handful of teams that are even as athletic as Penn State. I would say Penn State, in terms of speed and athleticism, probably a top 10 conservatively, top 5 in the country in terms of pure overall athleticism. And that's just on defense. Amari Evans, Tyler Warren, Nicholas Singleton. For what it's worth, Drew Aller as that statue quarterback somehow doesn't get taken down. He's able to fend off defenders that are much more athletic than him, that people would say, because he's that prototypical statue quarterback. And that's just not true. That's just not true. So Penn State athletically has the advantage over Boise State. Looking for your comments, questions. We'll turn to the comments section here as I see some people contributing their thoughts. We'll talk about it more. This game, the Fiesta Bowl, Penn State as an 11.5-point favorite against Boise State. We'll have more analysis on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Now, that has definitely happened to me. I've had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and helps you cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even your goals that you want to hit for the new year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Now, for me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton of money. Plus, with the goals feature, so there's an outline goals feature, you're able to automatically set aside money for your future, and then there's no more stressing about budgeting every single month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That is rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. And thank you for contributing your thoughts and questions in the comments section. Michigan is putting it to Bama. What's going to take SEC fans to admit the Big Ten is better? Well, the alibi, and like this is anything. This is Fiesta Bowl. This is conference expansion or realignment or conference power, power ratings, right? Anything you want to contribute here. Pregame shows wide open for discussion. So the Big Ten versus SEC debate. Well, SEC people, fans, spectators, ESPN probably. The alibi is going to be that, well, there were opt-outs, that a bunch of people were in the transfer portal, and honestly, Alabama was one of the programs that dealt with the most attrition to the portal, and that's no surprise with the coaching change and everything else. That Kalen DeBoer is going to want to bring his own types of players that fit his system. And that's good versus great coaching. I mean, he's a power forward SEC head coach, but the best coaches I think of all time adapt their systems to their personnel and don't force their personnel to adapt to their systems. So that's why Alabama was not as good, because Kalen DeBoer did not get his full structure, and that's going to be the excuse across the board. But you can't tell me that Michigan isn't dealing with this too. Michigan doesn't have its best defenders. Guys are opting out for draft prep and everything else. So it's kind of equal. It's equal there. But that's the excuse that you're going to hear, is that, well, Alabama had players in the portal. Guys opt out for the draft. So did Michigan. Michigan, what 7-5 last time I checked? I thought they would finish 6-6 this season. I got to find that episode to pull that take, because I forget who I had on as a guest, but they were so surprised. They're like, that's not going to happen. And it kind of did. Michigan certainly had a down year, but I look at that USC and Texas A&M game, because Texas A&M did not have a lot of opt-outs in that game, and USC beat them with a team full of backups. Truly, we want to talk about Alabama having a bunch of guys in the portal. USC had everybody and their brother in the portal for USC, and they came back and won against a Texas A&M team that it relatively had its base, guys that were going to be starters and playing next season. This wasn't just a bunch of backups for the Aggies. So bottom line is, I do think the Big Ten is better than the SEC, and it's showing at the moment. And that's even without Connor Stallions on the sideline. No comment on Stallions, honestly. I'm very excited to watch the game tonight and believe that Penn State will come away with a victory. Way too much talent and depth for the Broncos to handle. Mary, thanks for the comment. Happy New Year's Eve to you and each and every one of you checking out this live show. That's really it, is that Penn State, fortunately, in the case, has the talent, has the depth, because when you're in the Mountain West Conference, you just don't have the numbers to handle an Ashton Genty. Guys that are backups at Penn State would start for a lot of the competition that Boise State had played. So not everybody. I'm not talking about everybody. Oh, Zach's trying to say that the fourth string true freshman would play at. No, I am not. But I think of guys that are more rotational players certainly would be able to start at a Wyoming. I probably maybe not a UNLV. UNLV was a top 25 team there, but Penn State has the depth, has the talent. This is also the best team this is the best version of a team that Boise State has faced. I want to be careful with my comments because people will say, well, Oregon's the best team that they faced. Technically, yes, but that wasn't the best version of Oregon that they faced. This is the best. This Penn State team in the present, it's just a fact that at the end of December going into the new year, this version of Penn State would defeat that Oregon team from week 2. This is the best version of a Power 4 team that Boise State is facing. And I think this present Penn State team would beat the week 2 Oregon team 7 to 10 points, maybe 14. Maybe that's a 2 touchdown game. Oregon was not at its best at that point in time. Now they made it close, and Boise State, like I said, that's a good indicator to at least say, okay, they can hang with the tough teams, that they're not going to get rolled over, pushed over. And that's why I think it's somewhere in the middle. That Penn State gets its convincing victory. They cover the spread of 11.5. They win by 2 or 3 scores, but it's not going to be this dominant game where you watch the Penn State SMU game, and frankly, anybody else tell me you didn't walk away at halftime saying Penn State's got this. There's no way that SMU comes back in this game. That's not going to necessarily be the case. I feel like Boise State will be relatively in it for 3 quarters. And then when you get to that 4th quarter, Penn State being up by 2, because of the way that Boise State is built. Boise State is not able to sustain a comeback. They are not built to come from behind because they rely on the ground game. They need to be within 1 score. They need to be leading the game because that's what they do. So they can't shorten the game if they're down by 2 or 3 scores, because then that's a nail in the coffin for them. They can't come back from that. They don't have the wide receivers. Penn State is going to sell out for Ashton Genty. A.J. Harris can hold his own against the receivers. Jalen Kimber can hold his own against the receivers. Zion Tracy. Hopefully Penn State has Elliott Washington. You kind of need all hands on deck because the amount of times that Ashton Genty is going to run the ball in this game, regardless of margin, regardless of what the scoreboard says, he is going to get at least 30 carries. Penn State needs to be prepared, and you need everybody ready to go. And hopefully everybody is able to stay healthy in this game. Also, way to go, Iowa. The few times I pull for you, you blow it. I hope the wrestling team takes it out on them. For Penn State, yes, Penn State wrestling against Iowa. That one in the Bryce Jordan Center will be tons of fun. Actual question, who is the better matchup next round? I kind of think Georgia is more manageable than Notre Dame. So, yes, that's let's not look too far ahead, right? We're not supposed to do that. It is Boise State, Boise State, Boise State. But I can't help but start to do my research and say, okay, who is with Penn State's next matchup? Are they going to be playing Notre Dame? Are they going to be playing Georgia? I would like to see them play Georgia than I would more so than Notre Dame. And that has to do with an injury that Carson Beck to Gunnar Stockton. I think Penn State matches up better. The reason I think that Penn State matches up better with Georgia is just simply one thing. Notre Dame's, and it's not because Notre Dame has this electrifying receiving core, but that is the downfall for Penn State this season. If the 3 teams that have those elite wide receivers, those elite playmakers, because A.J. Harris can cover 1. Jalen Kimber and Zion Tracy can, with a little bit of help, can take away that second one, and then it's that third one that you're not paying attention to that gets open. We saw that against Ohio State. Whether it was Emeka Egbuka or Jeremiah Smith or Carnell Tate, right? Penn State can't cover all 3 of them at the same time. Eventually, one is going to break open. In the game against Oregon, that was the case against Tez Johnson. Penn State had an answer for Evan Stewart, Trayshawn Holden, but they couldn't cover the guy in the slot. And then when they moved A.J. Harris over, they could, but then Trayshawn Holden got open or a tight end, right? So Penn State doesn't have enough to cover 3 more or less elite playmakers. They can take away 1 or 2, and Notre Dame and Georgia don't have that, but I think Georgia's a little more egregious. Georgia actually leads the nation in drops by a team. So the Notre Dame passing attack is going to be a little more competent here. Georgia's defense is obviously elite, top 5, but so is Notre Dame's. So you couple that with, I'd take Riley Leonard in a heartbeat over Gunnar Stockton. That's an easy choice. Jeremiah Love at running back. I think Notre Dame has the better starting running back and probably the better running back depth than Georgia. The wide receivers are just more capable for Notre Dame. So all of those three things there, in general, the offense is more competent for Notre Dame, to couple with the fact that this is a top 10 defense conservatively. Georgia really needs its defense to step up. Notre Dame can play complementary football across the board. So in short, for Penn State's sake, they would rather face Georgia than a Notre Dame. Still looking for your comments, questions in this live pregame show. Just going to take a quick timeout, and when we come back, we'll jump back into the comments section. All right, and welcome back to this live Locked On Nittany Lions. The SEC are as delusional as any other fan base. It's how people are. There's nothing wrong with having pride in your team, in your conference, right? It's a security thing. I guess people are secure. But you don't need to go and criticize and say that the Big Ten plays a weak schedule. I am not disagreeing with anybody that the SEC doesn't play the best competition because they have to play those games in conference. But to say that the Big Ten is weak or that the Big Ten can't do this or that, I don't. The SEC is not. That's the delusion. It's not that the SEC isn't good, but to say that everybody else is bad in comparison to the SEC, that is what the delusion that we're talking about. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Who are our top targets in the transfer portal? Yes, there we go. Thank you, Devin. Who are our top targets in the transfer portal currently? So I have not seen any immediate updates there. And I know that they were targeting players like a Javier Suggs, interior defensive lineman for LSU, transferred. He played Division II. And then he transferred to LSU, and he was a solid rotational guy. And I would like that for Penn State. He's a veteran. He played some SEC football. I would absolutely welcome Suggs to join the defensive line room that just needs help. It just needs help. Anai White is a step in the right direction. We still don't know what Zane Durant and Denai Dennis Sutton are doing. And hopefully we get clarification sooner rather than later. Are they going to go in the draft? Are they going to stay? But it's going to take time for Malachi Williams and Jalen Harvey and even Max Granville. I know those guys were getting some playing time, but they still need time to develop. I do not trust Granville, Harvey, Liam Andrews as starters. They can rotate in and still get that playing experience. But to say, hey, Granville, you got to start. He was supposed to be a high school senior this year. And he ends up being a true freshman for Penn State. They redshirt him. But as a redshirt freshman, 18-year-old being a starting defensive end, I just don't think he's quite there yet. And that's just development. Rarely do you see an Abdul Carter or a Micah Parsons come in right away and become that defensive superstar. Max Granville is going to take time, but that's why they asked him to enroll early so they could get the development started, because I think he could be a really strong second half playmaker, but not a consistent starter. That's why they went and got an Anai White. Anai White would be a starter. So anybody on the defensive line, I'd like to see them get a replacement for KJ Winston. Kendall Daniels, because I've been messing up his name quite a bit over the course of my discussions about him. Kendall Daniels, a former safety linebacker hybrid from Oklahoma State. That's a player that I'd like to see them target. For what it's worth, I don't know if they're completely finished at wide receiver. I know they got Devontae, and I'm not trying to make that as a controversial hot take or what have you, but you bring in Devontae Ross, you bring in Kyron Hudson. Do you assume that Penn State is not going to have any transfers of their own where they exit? Is that going to alienate a Caden Saunders or an Amari Evans? I think Trey Wallace's job is safe because he is a starter. But even to an extent, we saw that with Keandre Lambert-Smith this past offseason beforehand, the offseason ago, where Keandre Lambert-Smith still would have been a starter. But bringing in Julian Fleming and then having a timeshare, essentially, he went from the number one wide receiver in a mediocre offense to what Andy Kotelnicki's system was, that we've seen as a top 10 offense. Penn State's offense is top 10. And Lambert Smith did not like the idea of being an optional target with Julian Fleming and Trey Wallace. So is that going to, I'm not trying to necessarily speak on it, but just know that we are going to see some unforeseen moves from players that we can't even expect. This is just one transfer portal window. There is going to be a spring transfer portal window as well. And once some of those camp battles are decided, for example, does anybody remember Storm Duck? Storm Duck's off to the NFL. You know, I just wish him well. I'm not trying to dunk on him here. But Storm Duck came in. He had the expectation that he was going to start, and he lost the camp battle. He went into the portal faster than he committed to Penn State for the second time around. So Devontae Ross is not a guaranteed starter. Kyron Hudson is not a guaranteed starter. They are coming in with the expectation that, yes, I will earn playing time. I will win my spring camp battle. But if they don't, they have 1 year of eligibility left, each of them. Why stay if you're going to be a backup unless they like Penn State that much? So that's my point, that you could have another Storm Duck situation, because I don't know how all of these are going to play out. I would like to think that Devontae Ross becomes a starter, Kyron Hudson becomes a starter, but it's not a guarantee. Boise State has got, so let's get back to Boise State. Boise State has gotten better also. I agree with that. But maybe not to the extent that Penn State has. Ashton Jeanty is Ashton Jeanty. I don't think Boise State has been in, I want to see Boise State in a scenario where they have to ad-lib a little bit. If they stick to the blueprint, this is a competitive game that's going to go down to the wire. But I don't think that happens. What happens when you face a team that is going to jump out to a lead? Not a San Jose State. I'm not talking because I know that Boise State was down against San Jose State and then came back. San Jose State is not that good of a ball team. They're very one-dimensional. They were one-dimensional in their own right. But what happens when you face a team that San Jose State could only pass the ball? So you take away the pass, they're finished. Penn State can go up tempo. They can slow it down and do what Boise State does. And they don't just have an Ashton Jeanty. They have two. And I'm not trying to take away from Ashton Jeanty as a Heisman running back, but they have a Nicholas Singleton and a Katron Allen, both of guys who have futures. They both have futures in the NFL. So you have two NFL caliber running backs compared to Boise State's one. You have an offensive line that is hitting its stride. You have Drew Aller, who is the best quarterback that Oregon has faced since Dylan Gabriel. Week 2. They have not faced a quarterback that is that good since Dylan Gabriel. So what happens when Boise State is down by 14 points late in the third quarter? Penn State's able to give Boise State a taste of its own medicine in the fact of they can sustain the 10, 12, 15 play drives where San Jose State couldn't, where UNLV could do that, but they couldn't go quick and up tempo and hit a pass over the top and score in the blink of an eye. Penn State scored in 22 seconds against West Virginia? Might have even been quicker than that. It was somewhere in that 15 to 25 second range. Penn State can do that. At the same time, run the same amount of plays, run a 15 play drive, and take 8 to 9 minutes off of the clock. That's what Boise State does. Penn State can do both. And then can Boise State come from behind with a passing attack? Lauder, the tight end, Camper, their leading wide receiver, Caples, another wide receiver for them. I like Penn State's defensive backs covering any of them. When it is obvious that Boise State is going to pass, can Maddox Madsen, who is a clear game manager right now with where he is in college football, first year starting for them, can he handle the responsibility of leading Boise State back against an elite defense? This is a top 10 defense. Boise State hasn't faced that. So all those things are stacked against the Broncos. If they get away from their blueprint, and that's what Penn State's going to do, take them out of their comfort zone, Boise State is not built to win in different ways. Penn State is. Penn State can win in a shootout. Penn State can win in a rock fight. Penn State can win They can win with the offense. They can win with the defense. They can force turnovers. Boise State doesn't force a lot of turnovers. They get pressure. But if the secondary has to cover for any longer, if Penn State's able to pick that pressure up, the secondary is left on an island. Guys are going to get open. I think Boise State, there was a stat going around where Boise State is 115th, give or take. I think maybe 117th against explosive plays. What does Penn State and Andy Kotelnicki do? What is the name of this offense? Explosive plays. So that's not going to bode well. How long before open field tackling really hurts them? They aren't fixing it anytime this season. I was at spring practice earlier this season, and they had the same issue then. Yeah, tackling's going okay. Boise State. You think Penn State has problems tackling? Boise State has problems tackling as well. So that's kind of like those two things essentially neutralize each other. But yeah, when you're facing an Ashton Jeanty, I've compared him to a pinball because he is just going to bounce off of defenders here. And Penn State's no different. Penn State, I think this is going to flow the way that a lot of games have, because Penn State will sell out for the run. Boise State's going to try to get Ashton Jeanty going. They might have a trick play in there, scripted in early on, but you want to stack the box, 7-8 defenders. You can run man-to-man to the outside because Cam Camper can't beat you one-on-one. Lauder can't beat you one-on-one. Caples, with what Penn State has in comparison, maybe a Mountain West cornerback. But A.J. Harris is going to be able, he's going to be sticky against a Cam Camper. So you need the play action. Penn State needs to stay disciplined. If they get overly aggressive and really try to sell out for Ashton Jeanty, and if I'm saying this, then Penn State's defense knows that. Penn State's going to go, whoa, they're running play action. We didn't expect that. They just need to stay disciplined and not be too over aggressive. And that's it. So Boise State will have a slow start, but it's how much of a lead can you build? Because I'm expecting Penn State to be up, give or take 24-7 at half. I think that's a fair score. If this is 17-7 or 10-7, right? Penn State needs to be able to score the points, because that's Boise State's better football is in the second half of the game. So if you build a comfortable enough lead, then Boise State can't do what it wants going into the second half where they try to wear you down, because then they have to pass the football. They don't want to pass the football. They have to pass the football. When Boise State played Oregon, they were missing 3 starters. If we are being fair, Boise State with those 3 starters beats Oregon. 2 special teams touchdowns would never happen again. Yeah, that's an outlier. That's an anomaly. I think anytime there's a game where somebody has 3 or 4 turnovers in a game, that's not likely to happen. That you can't read into the facts. So Oregon, there was a luck factor. There was a luck element in there for Oregon for sure. Like I said, that's an indicator that Boise State can compete, because I don't think that Penn State just absolutely wipes them out. Does Penn State win convincingly? Does Penn State win by multiple scores? Yes. But in the case of, this is over by the middle of the second quarter, no. Because Boise State's not built like that. Boise State is built to be in the game until time is against them. So when it gets late in the third quarter and it's a 14-17 point game, Boise State cannot run an air raid offense to go get points in a matter of minutes to keep the game alive for them. You can run the football, you can keep running the football and just hope for the best, but then time is against you. Time becomes your biggest enemy if you're Boise State. And then Penn State, because they can slow it down, the second they get a stop, say they stop that, Boise State tries to go up tempo, tries to throw the football, they get to the 50-yard line, they don't get anything, they got to punt the football, then Penn State can rattle off that 8, 10, 12, 15 play drive that is going to be really demoralizing late in the game, like a Boise State does, right? Yeah, man, week 2 was a good one. Hang your hat on all of that this year. Can't tell if that's sarcasm or credit where credit's due, right? Boise State didn't lose that game by a bunch. They were in it until the end. I think that Oregon was going through its own identity. They didn't figure out its offensive line, but they still scored 37 points. So it was clearly more of a defensive issue for Oregon. Much respect to Penn State. Boise State does not turn the ball over. No, they do not. 3 interceptions for Maddox Madsen. SMU did not play well, and the great defense of Penn State made them pay. Looking forward to a better matchup. Go Blue. If Boise State can stick to its game plan, then they have a completely fair shot in this game. But I think Penn State's going to take them out of that comfort zone to where Maddox Madsen is going to be asked to do something that he really hasn't done all season against the likes of this competition. There is no A.J. Harris in the Mountain West Conference. There is no Abdul Carter in the Mountain West Conference. So, and I'm looking forward to that. Cage Casey, the left tackle, I think he's a top 15 Pro Football Focus offensive tackle. So he's one of the best offensive tackles in the country, objectively. But I look at the other side of the offensive line. They're getting their starters back, but it's Deni Dennis Sutton that I circle in as a key player. And if Abdul Carter's going to get all the attention on passing downs, because they don't use Ashton Jeanty a lot in the passing game. So if he stays in the block, or if Lauder has to chip the starting tight end for Boise State, Deni Dennis Sutton's going to get one-on-one matchups. And I think he is going to eat the lunch of that right tackle at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And he might have 2 or 3 sacks in this game if Abdul Carter is going to get all that attention. Zane Durant as well in the middle is going to make plays. So where Abdul Carter, if he doesn't have the biggest game of his life, Deni Dennis Sutton and Zane Durant and Devon J. Thomas are there to change that. They're able to make up for a lack of production, if you will. Zach, do you think at the end of the game, this game might be more about Katron and Nick instead of Jeanty? I'm sure they are tired of hearing about that running back. Yes, because of game script, because I think Penn State is going to win 38-20. How do they get to that? If you're winning, you are going to run the football more. So Ashton Jeanty will get his. I fully expect Ashton Jeanty to at least get 100 yards by volume. It might take 30, 35 carries, but he's going to get to 100, 125 yards. That's what he's done every season. He might score, or every game, excuse me. He might score a touchdown or two. But that's where I think the baseline is for an Ashton Jeanty. But in the process, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen could and should have 100 yards each, because they will also get the volume by Penn State having the lead, and they got to run the game. Boise State's, this is where I will finish. This is where I'll finish. Boise State's defense in general has not been in a situation where they are on the field for long, sustainable drives. So Boise State's defense, by proxy, is as good as it is because Ashton Jeanty and the offense allow them to rest, figure out a game plan, make adjustments on the sideline because Ashton Jeanty is that battering ram. So what happens when Boise State's defense has to go up against that time and time and time again? Those same 12-play demoralizing drives that Penn State can run that Boise State has not seen, where it's a quick 3-and-out, they punt the football, and then Penn State runs those kinds of drives. I don't think Boise State's defense is going to be prepared for that, and that's why my final score is 38-20. That's going to do it here for this live pregame show. Thanks so much for checking it out. Thank you for all your thoughts, comments, and feedback here. 38-20 is my final score prediction, and don't worry, we're going to be chatting about this game more. I'll have a live halftime reaction for the Fiesta Bowl as well. There's going to be a live post-game show with special guests in addition to myself. We're going to have a team to talk about Penn State and Boise State when it goes final here. No days off here on the holiday, New Year's Eve, but it is great. I'd rather be doing this. I'd rather be on the show talking about Penn State than, going out and about on the town for New Year's Eve. So thank you so much for this platform. It has been an incredible 2024. Here's to an even better 2025. Thank you so much for all the support. Thank you for checking out this live show. And don't worry, there's going to be more coverage and more chatter around your favorite Penn State sports teams here on Locked On Nittany Lions.